You're good to go.
Plans to be outside.
Call to order the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee for May 24th, 2018. We'll start with introductions. To my right,
Bill Daniels.
Troy Boldinger, Mike Mitchell, Christopher Cook,
Doug Healy.
Karen Mori.
Roger Politice.
Phil Lewis.
and approval of the minutes. Has everybody had a chance to review the minutes? Are there any edits?
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the minutes in a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
I'll have to abstain.
So motion passes.
Yes. Next is citizen comments on issues and items not on the agenda. Do you have any comment cards?
We have no comment cards at this time.
All right. We have no presentations this evening.
No presentations. We do have a couple of discussion topics that will be fairly long this evening.
Okay. First, under general business is the Charter Parks Ordinance.
Great. So I have a presentation set up for us. So if I can figure this out really quick. And it's going to take a second for it to warm up. But so as you're aware, we've had some conversations around our park system and moving to the direction of having all of our parks recognized as charter protected. This was a point of emphasis with the City Commission. We've had a couple of conversations as members of PRAC. We had a short presentation to the City Commission during a work session on May 8th of this month, and this is a similar presentation. We're going to get a little bit more into the details, so if anyone happened to catch the presentation to the City Commission, we're actually going to go through each of the individual parks that we're presenting and recommending to move forward to commission as the easier parks to recognize as charter parks, and then we'll have some additional parks that we'll need to go through and do some additional discussion, both as staff, as PRAC, and then bringing forward to the City Commission. So I'm going to hand out a document. You can take a copy and pass it around. This is an outline of all of our currently recognized parks within our park system, and they're broken into categories. So we have parks that are already designated as charter parks. We have 11 parks that are currently designated. We have what we're calling phase one, which is the parks that'll be a little easier for us to move forward to the City Commission. These facilities typically have pretty finite boundaries, recognized fairly easily, both in deed language as well as the plat language, typically in the delineation of the park boundaries. And then we have phase two, which is additional research and discussion will be needed. So those are the ones that have varying degrees of difficulties. Some of them we're going to have to get really specific, and we're going to have the commission identify if the property really should be park, or if they think it's a surplus property, or if they believe that it should be continue to be used as property from a different department. And then our one lonely already recognized as a park by ordinance is John Storm Park. So we'll go through again what each of these means as part of the PowerPoint presentation.
Oh, wait.
Great. So just first screen is Chapter 10 of the Oregon City Charter recognizes parks as holding a specific purpose, and it recognizes them so that they can be preserved for future use. So to be used only as a parks and recreation use, not to be used in any other way. Section 41 is details the approval by voters. So the commission may not sell or use a park or park property for any reason other than for parks and recreation use without going to a vote of the people. So they cannot sell or lease it, vacate it, construct anything permanently on it. You're all aware of the Wesley Lynn Park need to go to the voters based on that specifically. And then they cannot change the status of a natural park. We currently only have one designated natural park in our charter, listed as a charter park, and that is a waterboard park. Section 42, this lays out which of the facilities currently are charter parks in our charter. We have 11 of them. There is one additional piece of property in the charter which is not actually a park or owned by the city, and so it states if it's ever to come into ownership of the city that it will be recognized as a natural park, and it's a little triangle piece on Lynn Avenue across the street from Singer Creek Park. So no real value for recreational use, and I wouldn't envision the city probably acquiring that at any point, at least making a meaningful attempt to acquire it. And again, if at any point you have questions, feel free to ask. So the section 43 lists additional parks. So this is the piece where we're going to get into a little bit of the meat and potatoes of the conversation. So it lists additional parks may be created and land established as parks upon the acceptance by the commission of a gift to the city for park purposes or for dedication of land as a park. And so the city attorney understands this as being anytime the city goes through a land use process and there is a plat that denotes that a portion of property should be park or open space use, that then is accepted by the city commission as part of the development, that then is recognized as being a park. So it has recognition and in essence the same protections, but we don't have it recognized by ordinance, and it's not technically listed in the charter as having charter protection. Next bullet point, real property owned or acquired by the city in other manners may be delineated as park by ordinance. So if we purchase property and decide to pass an ordinance to recognize it as a park, such as we did with the John Storm Park, that is the way that it can be have the same types of protections as being in the charter. Parks areas may be specifically designated as natural parks, and when so designated, they have the same need to be maintained the same provisions as in section 41. So if we ever adopt a park as a natural park, it cannot have anything built on it other than for natural uses. So we can't remove vegetation unless it's hazardous. We can't build structures unless there are pathways. So quite a few things that we cannot do on those properties. Again, the only property that is currently designated in that form is Waterboard Park. And then the next one, whenever any real property is designated as a park or provided herein, it is subject to all the provisions of Chapter 10. So as we discussed a couple of months ago, when the idea came up around talking about properties and possibly moving them from city-owned properties into parks properties specifically, I said that we would come back at some point and actually get into the meat and potatoes of it a little bit more. This is an outline of all of the parks, all of the tax lots that are owned by the city. So you'll notice that there are 94 tax lots that are currently designated as parks and recreation, which makes up 30% roughly of the inventory of tax lots in the city. Public Works owns and maintains most of the other pieces, and then we have a couple of other areas that are listed. So urban renewal, multiple owners or owners not yet established, those are city departments as owners, not necessarily outside owners, not the city. So all of these are city-owned tax lots. The multiple owners may be that we have the property where the community development is currently located, which is also set to be the new police facility. It might also have additional property available to build. There's been some discussion around possibly moving City Hall there at some point. So that could be a facility that might have multiple owners, as it were, but it's all city-owned property.
Question.
Yes.
Everything we have, pardon me, everything we have on that list is part of the 30% then, or is that not true?
Not necessarily. So we do have some other properties that are currently not recognized as parks that are park department owned and maintained. So we have some trailheads. We additionally have some.
But I guess I misspoke myself. Everything on this list is included in 30%.
Oh, yes, correct.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. So all of these properties that are on that list are included in the 30% that's up on the screen. Yeah. So we went through the charter parks. Now these are the non-charter parks, which are listed again on the sheet that I just handed out. So we have quite a few properties that we need to go through and bring up to a process of recognizing them as parks by ordinance, which is where we're gonna try to get to eventually. So going through, I'm gonna talk a little bit about again, the properties that are easily designated as parks and give a couple of examples. And then later on, I'm going to go through each of the individual parks that we are attempting to move forward to have a recommendation of this group to move forward to the City Commission. So this is an example. So Richard Bloom Tot-Lot Park. So the deed is held by the city. There is no mention of the park or a park on the plat or the deed. So we have operated it as a park. It's recognized as a park. It has playground features, restrooms, landscaping, all to be used as a park. It's actually donated to the city, and I'm assuming the intent and purpose was to be used as a park, but it's not really been recognized in a formal way. So moving forward to recognize it by ordinance will be a way to recognize it permanently as being a park facility. Shenandoah Park. So the plat does designate it as a park, but we do not have it recognized in any other formal way. So again, no ordinance, it's not in the charter. And I'll say one more thing as we're moving through. So the red outline that you'll notice on the parks that are listed, that is the currently recognized in our GIS mapping system as the boundary of the park. And as we move through a couple of the other examples, you'll notice where the boundary doesn't exactly match with what is either recognized as park or what might possibly be recognized as owned by another department within the city. So John Storm Park, so this is the one that I told you is designated by ordinance. So the one interesting piece with this is that the park boundaries, you'll notice, actually go across the street, and we own a little triangle piece of the landscape on the other side of the street, as well as part of the actual street. So I'm not sure the thought process when this happened, but that is all park property.
It's where the elm was.
The Abernathy Elm.
It's where the Abernathy elm was
I think the elms
until we lost it.
actually in this area, is that right? There's a placard at some
can't see
point
which one
somewhere
it is.
over.
Yeah. Okay, I don't
So
know.
I think the new tree is the oak is here, and I think this is the plaque and the stump possibly. But yeah, I'm not
Could be.
positive. But that is, so this is ODOT right-of-way in this area. We have a right-of-way for the city kind of going through there. So it's a complicated site, even though it is, again, one of the sites that is recognized by ordinance as a park. So like I said earlier, we also have additional parks that will need further research or discussion. So this is Abernathy Creek Park, one of Doug's favorites. And this is the piece of property that you'll notice in the top left-hand side that was brought forward by Mr. Nikita, requesting of commission and requesting of PRAC to look further into acquiring as part of the actual park. So it's currently owned and maintained by Public Works as their streets division. It was purchased to allow the right-hand turn lane off of Washington Street and for the bridge dedication that's there as well. So it serves no true ongoing purpose for Public Works. It might possibly serve a purpose for parks if we're able to find a way to incorporate it into the park, either through a bridge, a pedestrian bridge or something across to that area. But currently it is separated by the creek, which runs through there.
While this is on, down in the lower part is parking for the Abernathy Center. An easement exists there for a potential future bridge across into, that would go to 15th Street and over to the park. So there is an easement there.
And so you're talking about kind of in this general area right
Yes.
here? Yeah. And there is on the transportation systems plan a multi-use trail that's called out for right there as well. But you'll also notice that, so if we were to decide ultimately that we are not to incorporate the section along Washington Street into the park, all the rest of the pieces are actually recognized by ordinance as a park. So this one would already be, in essence, have charter park protections and would not need further consideration by commission. But if we were to incorporate this additional piece, if it's the decision of PRAC to make a recommendation to City Commission, and if City Commission takes that recommendation and moves forward with incorporating it into the park, then we would need to go forward with a new ordinance recognizing the appropriate boundaries of the park.
Did Public Works comment at all on that piece of property we made the presentation?
We've had some side conversations with Public Works. There's a concern about what it was purchased with Public Works funding, similar to when we purchase something with Parks funding, needing to use it for that purpose. So probably there would need to be some type of recognition and possibly exchange of funds through the budget. Now they did use a portion of it for their intended purposes. So again, there might be some wiggle room in there, and I'm sure there'll be some further
Maybe we
discussions.
could trade the Mint Park for this one with Public Works.
There you go.
There we go, yeah.
I'm so curious why it's on the unchallenged list, because I want to challenge it.
Okay, we can have that conversation for
I
sure.
had a question, Phil.
Yes, sir.
Isn't the veterinary business located in that adjacent property?
Yeah, so we have a couple of, so right here is a section of property that's owned by the vet clinic. Right next to it is a section which is unimproved right-of-way, which is actually part of the parking lot that the vet clinic uses. And then these properties over here are also owned by that clinic, so.
Okay, I've got a concern. And there's a parking lot that extends into the yellow portion there. Part of that parking lot is on the vet clinic's property, but I think the parking lot extends further into the yellow portion. And it says for patrons of the veterinary clinic only on those. And I always felt that they were in city ownership, but I wasn't 100% sure.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm not positive what there may be an agreement between Public Works and the vet clinic on maybe they're leasing the space. I'm not positive. But.
They were leasing those, I believe they're leasing those from Public Works.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure, they're critical to their business.
Oh, I'm sure.
At least half of those spaces that they're leasing.
Yeah, I was going to say that there's a lot of parking spaces there I've never seen filled up. But anyway, that's beside the point at this point.
Yeah, so, and I guess I would leave it to this group if we want to have conversations around, so this is currently listed as an additional research and discussion needed for Abernathy Creek pertaining to the Washington property. If in the coming months, if it's a priority of this group to further those conversations with Public Works to look at transitioning the property, that's something we can definitely look into. The City Commission asked for a presentation as well on this property, and they got the similar presentation during their work session earlier this month. But if there is to be a formal recommendation, again, we'll probably come back in the next month or two to this group after we've had refined conversations with Public Works. The next property is Barkley Hills Park. So you'll notice a couple of things on this. It is a very unique park, having separation both by right-of-way as well as just distance of other properties in between. The park boundary, you'll notice the red boundary line on the lower right-hand side does not extend to the full length of the property. And we have a couple of tracks in the upper right-hand side which are dedicated as park in the plat, and additionally have overlays for stormwater systems. And so it's a complicated site. It's also fairly steep. We actually had a slide over in the area just north of the central part of that, so off of kind of Whitman Way this last year, Peter Skeen Way. So it's an interesting site. Definitely need to have further discussions and refinements of what the park boundaries are and what the purposes of each of those pieces of property are.
So those purple areas were dedicated as part of development for park purposes.
Correct.
And so they are protected, I presume.
That would be our assumption.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they're dedicated in the plat, which means the city accepted them as being parks purposes. They also have an easement for stormwater systems. So it is a park though, so it's part of the park. So next steps, and again, this was as presented to the City Commission. So we're going to look to bring forward easy parks for designation through ordinance. We'll have further discussion and refinement of other properties at the staff level. We'll work through PRAC and bring forward recommendations to the Commission for designation through ordinance. And then we will more clearly define boundaries for current designated charter parks through ordinance. So that is the kind of the last step, is that some of our parks, because of the age of the parks, don't necessarily have a definitive boundary. So one example would be Clackamas Park, which is just listed as being at the confluence of the Willamette and Clackamas rivers, and no further delineation. So there'll be at some point a need to probably move forward and make sure that we're clearly outlining, and the City Commission is recognizing what those boundaries are. But we have bigger fish to fry in this process before we move on to those. So the next steps, we're going to go through each of the parks that we are kind of our phase 1 parks, and we can talk about them if you have questions or concerns. As Karen stated in Event Park, we can go through and kind of look at each of these park facilities. And again, if you have questions or concerns before moving them on, at the conclusion, we will probably ask for a by motion, a recommendation to move forward to commission for hopefully all the parks. But if you see things that you want further discussion, let us know and we can pull things and move those forward separately. So Chapin Park, there is no mention of the park in the deeds. It's parks that the boundaries are actually pretty firm in being recognized as the boundaries of the park. So we have no concerns that we'll be able to put together pretty easily the language to incorporate this as a park by ordinance.
So are you looking for support at this point?
Yeah, so I guess probably just general discussion if there's basically any reservations of anybody, we can kind of put it to the
So
side.
it's the only large park in that area.
Yeah.
There isn't an existing ordinance? Because they named it Chapin Park because the Chapin family gave the property to the city.
But it's,
And I
Yeah.
would assume there was an ordinance when they named it.
yeah, there's no, it might have been by resolution. Yeah, we pulled all the ordinances that we could find for any of the properties.
Interesting.
Yeah. So seeing no concerns, we'll move on to the next park.
Yeah.
So Dement Park. So again, it's not mentioned as a park in the deed or in the vacation, and it has, part of it was a vacation of right-of-way, I'm assuming, in creating part of the park. The other section was in deed. So if there's any concerns with this, and I will say that the city's position currently is that basically any park within our system would need to go to a vote of the people to change from basically having charter recognition. This would just be clarifying the city's position that these are designated as parks and what the boundaries of these parks are. So even if you have concerns that they are being recognized by ordinance, if we were to do something with any of these properties, we would still have to go to a vote of the people to do something with them that would not be consistent with being used as a park.
Am I correct in saying there are no recreational equipment on this park at all?
No.
So
What was that comment?
it's essentially a vacant lot. There's no recreational equipment on the lot or anything.
And
So you probably already discussed it and I was not listening. It's always a possibility. But so by affording these parks as charter, adopting them as a charter park by ordinance, and giving them the same status as the ones that are already designated as charter parks, did you already cover what the protections are? What does that actually do other than if we're trying to sell it or use it for a different purpose in a park? Is that
Yeah, so the main reason to recognize them as a park by ordinance is that they would have the same protections as the charter parks, which the charter parks are protected by not being able to be sold or used for any other purpose other than for parks purposes. So
What's the closest park to this?
Rivercrest.
And how far away is that?
It's 8 blocks.
I'm not exactly sure.
This is just off Charmin.
Yeah. And Rivercrest is a substantially large park.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And I've actually been trying to figure out how this became a park because it was specifically purchased to sell. It was to get the right of way and sell the property. I think they were trying to interest the abutting property owners into buying portions of it. And I still haven't figured out what that piece of magic is that turned this into a park. I honestly think this is surplus property.
Well, I would tell you that probably part of the conversation, I think, in the trial for Waterboard Park / Upper Yard / Lower Waterboard Park was the use of the park and the city's recognition of it as, a park, and the Upper Yard was never really recognized in the determination by the court. Was never really used as a park or recognized formally as a park was their determination. So in
So we're
my
stuck
mind,
with
and
it?
yeah, so in my mind, and in the conversations we've had with our city attorney, is that this is, for all intents and purposes, a park, but we're going through and clarifying. There could, as we've had discussions previously, we could always go to a vote of the people for some of these properties, and spell out what we would, what we'd use the money, the proceeds from, going back into the parks or acquire additional park property, or, it's just at this point, it's for all intents and purposes a park.
I vote this one out.
Is this being maintained in any way currently by the Parks Department?
Yes.
Yeah.
Dement, you're talking about Dement?
Well, and maybe the staff person at the time, maybe the name describes the mental condition of the staff person that decided to do it. So,
Yeah, because even the county didn't put any deed restriction on when they sold us the property, so it's,
I guess I've heard from Karen that she does not necessarily support moving this forward. Is there?
I would concur with Karen that I think we need to explore the possibility of maybe this being sold or used as surplus property, and with the opportunity of using the proceeds for land banking future park sites where we're underserved.
So I guess I would say there's no, from a purely logistical standpoint, there's no difference in recognizing it as a park by ordinance and including it in this grouping versus not. And we can probably, my point being that we would still have to go to a vote of the people in order to do something with this other than having it be a park. So,
but designating it as a park makes it more difficult, I think.
okay.
Put it on the way down.
It's worth the discussion.
Phil, if I could,
how large is this parcel?
Oh,
2 building lots?
it's not
basically.
large, maybe a quarter acre.
I agree we probably should do some more research on it, but I also want to say that I'm not at all in favor of selling. Selling something today, putting money away to buy something later, we can just assume our money's going to be worth less. But holding onto the property and selling at the time we need the money will be a greater value to the city.
Yeah, I guess I'll just offer an opinion here. I think we got to look at these closely, because from my standpoint, our department is the worst funded one that we've got. There's a lot of things that we cannot do because we don't have money. My opinion is, if we consider this surplus property, that we need to put a condition on it that any revenue that's taken off lands that were formerly parkland goes to the park department. But I don't know, just holding on to it, I mean, if it comes available, the fact of the matter is, it will probably be a site that some developer will want to put a couple houses on. I think it would, I think the value is already there.
Well, and to Troy's point, though, I think it's a matter of timing. So I wouldn't say sell it and then hold on to the funds. I'd say turn around and use those funds to buy additional property somewhere else.
Yeah, my
That way we're using
question,
dollars for dollars at this
Exactly.
time.
Yeah.
Well, and I can appreciate a developer possibly needing this, but in past experience, I would suggest that it's more valuable to a developer when we don't want to sell it than it is at the time we want to sell it. Meaning, let them come to us to ask for it, and it's more valuable than us putting it on the market. And if we don't need the money right this minute, I say let's put our efforts in other areas.
But in any case, we're agreed that we don't want to include this as a charter park.
I would say that we probably should do a little more discussion and research on it. I don't know.
I'm going to make a formal motion, because there's no recreational value to this. Nobody uses it. There's no recreational equipment on it. And I'll make a formal motion that this actually not be included as a list for recommendation as a charter park.
And I second that motion.
I can support that.
So we have a motion and a second on the table, I guess, for the discussion.
Formally not include this in the discussion.
To formally not include this in the
Consideration charter
ordinances,
parks.
consideration of ordinances moving forward as recognizing as charter parks.
Correct.
Correct.
I guess I'd like to just say something about this property, and that is that it is a green space, and somebody is using it. It might not be human in nature. And, well, green spaces are disappearing, and with that are a species, and that's something to consider. And if you make it more valuable to the natural species by planting natural native plants in there, you could make use of it by increasing our, helping to maintain what we have left of our species. That's all, native species.
And again, I think there's more research and discussion that
Yeah.
has to happen around this before we decide to, you know, if we do decide to put it on the market or do something else with it other than a park. There's definitely some more research that has to be done. But for now,
Yeah, I think just because we call it surplus, that doesn't mean we're selling it. It just takes the status of charter park away. It's perhaps easier to sell it down the road if it's surplus as opposed to charter when voters are looking at whether it's a yes or no to sell something.
right?
There are people or organizations like the Wildlife Federation and other organizations that are looking to buy property like this. And if we do decide to sell it, then maybe that's someone we could offer it up to, and they would come in and make it useful for that purpose. That's a suggestion.
I think the idea here isn't necessarily that we're trying to make some money on some property. It's trying to reduce the maintenance load on an already understaffed maintenance, park maintenance.
By going native, you're reducing that then.
And if you give it to a private or sell it to a nonprofit, then you're taking the load of maintenance by the city away from, and that's actually the purpose of trying to reduce that kind of. I mean, we went through this. I don't know what year it was, but last time I served on this committee, and none of the properties that we put up for sale the community said no. We don't want to put any of them up.
Yeah, I think the reason that happened is they listed a whole bunch of parks and they were all next to somebody's
House.
property and so forth. And,
Dog park.
yeah.
So for tonight, the discussion is around including it in the charter discussion, right?
Right.
Yeah, so-
The motion is not
Focusing
to
on
include
the
it as a
easiest
charter.
properties to move forward in the short term, and we'll move
Yeah,
this to a.
This has nothing to do with
secondary.
how the property will be used in the future.
Correct.
Right. Just does not put it on the list of to be changed to charter. Recognized.
Yeah, okay.
So we have a motion and a second. We've had discussion. Unless there's further discussion, I can take
So
roll.
the actual motion is to not include this particular park in the charter discussion.
The recommendation. Right.
Or the
In the phase
Parks by
one.
ordinance
In the
discussion.
phase one Parks by Ordinance discussion.
Correct.
Yes. Okay, so I'll take roll unless there is further discussion. Okay, Daniels,
Aye.
Ballinger,
Aye.
Mitchell,
Aye.
Cook,
Aye.
Neely,
Aye.
Maury,
Aye.
Fowler Tice.
Aye.
Okay. So moving on, Filbert Run Park. So portion of the property is no mention of park in either the plat or the deed. The other, although it was purchased with SDC funds, Parks SDC funds, the other one does list in the deed to use as open space or other parks uses.
And we're developing a plan for this piece.
And we are developing a plan for this park specifically. The boundaries are pretty evident, and it's one of our newer subdivisions, and so we have pretty clear boundary lines on this.
In the asterisks, what are the purpose of the two asterisks behind those Filbert Run and Glen Oak?
Oh, those are not the official names yet. So when we move forward,
Currently known as.
yeah, so when we move forward with in theory, these will move forward before we actually have formal names for both of those parks. They will just be listed by their tax lot numbers most likely. So unless there's further discussion or concerns, I'll move on to the next one. Glen Oak Park. So there's no mention of the park in the deed. Again, it was purchased with SDC funds and partially purchased with Metro Green Space funds, and is one of our parks that we have designated to move forward with development in the next year. So I'm assuming there's no concerns with this. Great. Hartkey Park.
Hartkey?
So
Is it Hartkey?
Hartkey.
No.
Hartkey Park. So it does recognize it in the plat and does show what the name of the park is, Hartkey Park.
Should be a dairy.
So it is a fairly delineated park. It has developed hardscape on the park as well.
I will say that this is one of the parks that was put up for a vote to sell for much the same reasons as the maintenance issues versus what it's really used for. Actually, I don't believe there's any, maybe it's changed. I haven't driven by there in a while, but there's not, I don't even think, is there a swing, is there a tenant, is there any kind of?
There's recreational.
There's
and
tennis courts and
Children's
basketball
recreational.
Yeah.
and open field area.
There's hardscape.
Yeah, actually, I think it's a nice park.
And we have had some conversations with the city attorney around the properties that are recognized by plat and then accepted by the city, and whether or not we would actually be able to sell them legally, because if they were not to be used as intended, they most likely would then revert back to the grantee of those properties.
And staff, understand, I mean, they recognize that is being used as a quote unquote neighborhood park at this date. I mean, it's used as a park and not just as a.
Yeah, it's currently being used as a neighborhood park. I wouldn't say that it's, it's a pocket park, neighborhood park. It's not one of our larger facilities. So it doesn't get the type of use that we might see at some of our community parks. But it is a park.
I go by it several times a month, and I'd like to have to keep it as a park.
It's what, Doug? Say that again.
I go by it several times a month, and I'd like to see it kept as a park.
Unless there's further discussion or concerns, we can move on to the next one. So Hazelwood Park, similar to Hartkey Park, was recognized by the plat and very similarly recognized as being named Hazelwood Park.
It's actually the same developer as Hartkey.
Oh, is that right? It's a nice open area, really nice, well maintained. There's a concrete slab there, and I assume at one point there was a picnic table there, but there are no amenities. It looks like there's a unused water fountain there too, but it looks old and unused.
There is.
But I think it's one of these parks that I think if we did I propose taking to phase one and calling it a charter park, but I think it'd be great on these parks that don't seem to have that many amenities to do a survey of people, say within a quarter mile and so forth, and find out what they would like to happen at those parks. And to me, this is a prime candidate because other than being real nice open space, there's not anything else to attract people. No picnic table, although I think there was one. No recreational equipment, but I think it has potential.
There's a slide which
Is
is
there?
newly refurbished and swing set which was
So what do I know?
recently refurbished as well.
No comment.
And we planted a couple of new trees on the property recently.
Very good. Hartkey and Hazelwood were both what could have been space that a homeowners association would be responsible for. But the developer platted the homes, platted that as a park, and then turned around and gave it to the city. So these are kind of these fuzzy ones. It should have been an HOA park.
Yeah.
They
during
graciously gave it to us.
So during the time of the development, a lot of the smaller pocket parks, that is exactly what happened in the city. In the master planning processes for Parks and Recreation, decided to move forward with not accepting any parks moving forward that were less than 3 acres for parks use. It does, as Bill stated, it does take some effort and more energy to maintain some of these smaller parks than some of our larger parks, which we can use larger equipment, and it makes more sense to get the staff out there.
This is where Shenandoah and Allegheny streets come together, right? I'm sure that's right.
No.
I'm not positive.
The Shenandoah, I think, is one, and
That's Shenandoah
Allegheny.
Park, isn't it?
Well, this is Hazelwood.
This is Hazelwood.
Oh, I'm sorry, I've been talking all
You're in
this
the
time
wrong
about,
park.
I'm in the wrong park. I was talking about Shenandoah Park all this time. Sorry about that.
So unless there's further discussion or concerns, we can move on to the next one.
No.
Great. Hillendale Park. So part of the park is needed to be used for public park and recreation purposes. A couple of the smaller sections don't have mention of park use on the plat or deed, but they're very minimal in comparison to the larger footprint of the park.
You know, this is the park that I've been talking about, that we need signage for pathways, because you can gain access from, what's that road? Not Caulfield,
Claremont?
Hazel. What is it?
Claremont?
Yeah, that's Claremont, yes. You can get access to Claremont and walk into two of the streets on the Red Soils campus there. So it's got some tremendous connectivity. And it's got a wonderful stream running through it.
It does.
Good part.
Okay.
And that's where our pickleball.
Yeah, very active, very active pickleball.
No question.
Should have found my trophy.
Both baseball, softball, soccer, very heavily used for sports as well.
Should be kept.
So next park is Park Place Park. There is no mention of park on the plat or deed. It was master planned many years ago in partnership with the county. It has some interesting characteristics. You'll notice this one has a additional park piece on the upper section that's not currently on our GIS overlay as part of the park, which we'd like to incorporate into the park. Additionally, there's some right-of-way that runs right through the center of the park, which is unimproved currently.
In the right of way, who owns that?
It's the city. Well, it's the city is responsible for it, but it's unimproved right-of-way. So if you were to walk on it, it looks like it's actually just part of the park currently.
So it's not like a gravel road or anything like that?
The southern section is a roadway which transitions into a gravel road. As you'll notice, a couple of houses there in the lower left-hand side in this area. And so this is, I believe, asphalt up through here, and then it starts to get into a gravel, and there's a little bit of a turnaround here by the restroom facilities.
I think someplace, whether it's in the charter or wherever it is, we're supposed to have parks within 1,000 feet of residences, is that right?
Yeah, so we have within a half mile or a 10-minute walk is typical
Is that it?
as being recognized as where you should have a park. So half mile is actually listed in our Parks and Recreation Master Plan. There's a big petition nationwide to have everything within a 10-minute walk. So that's kind of roughly equivalent, a half mile, 10-minute walk.
And there's nothing else that close with that fits
There's
that?
really nothing else in this area.
So we want to keep it.
Even close, yeah. Richard Bloom Tot Lot Park, which we discussed earlier. And unless there's further discussion or concerns.
Oh, it's a great place for
Shenandoah
the
Park.
There's
Tuts.
Shenandoah,
There's
the
Shenandoah.
Shield Park.
That's the one I'm talking about.
So the plat does designate it as a park, but we would be moving forward to recognize it as a park by ordinance as well.
And you can see that square there where I think there must have been a picnic table.
Unless there's further discussion. Last one that we will chat about is Wesley Lynn Park, which is one of our newer parks. There's no mention of the park on the plat or the deed, but it is recognized as a park, and the boundaries are fairly delineated. As this group knows, there is some right-of-way roadway easements that run through this section here, which is currently proposed to be used for the Icon development in this area.
So is that unusual that there's no mention of being on the deed when it was, clearly it was added by commission to become a park? And that was the purpose of purchasing that area, but is that an oversight or just, why wouldn't that be mentioned on the deed? Is that a question?
On the deed. No, I'm not positive why. Yeah, I would say even, so the only park that we've purchased, park land that we've purchased since I've been here is the section attached to the cemetery, and we didn't put it in the deed language when we brought it on. But moving forward, we'll have a process, and on the next slide, we'll kind of get into that as
Glen
well.
Oak, is that purchase that show up on a deed now that it's been purchased, or Philbert Run Park? Is that something we're doing now moving forward?
So we have no intention at this point to move to adjust the deed language, but in the recognition through the ordinance, there'll be a formal recognition of the boundaries and everything, so it'll have those similar protections.
The thing I notice on the deeds, if the city buys the property, it doesn't go on the deed because the city's buying it as a park. If someone gives you the property or sells it to you for $1 and wants it protected as a park, it goes in as a deed restriction. But you don't normally add a deed restriction if the city's actually doing the buying. It's not the seller's motive, it's the city's motive.
Correct, yeah. Unless there's further discussion, we'll move on to the next. So those are all the parks. So as of right now, with the exception of Dement Park, our intention would be to move forward with ordinances for all of the other parks to be recognized by the City Commission as parks by ordinance. So if there is maybe if we could have a motion and then adoption of a recommendation to move forward with those 10 parks as listed.
So moved.
Seconded.
So by making a motion at this point, what happens to the Phase 2 properties?
So the Phase 2 properties, again, there's further discussion that needs to happen at the staff level. Some of the properties have uses both within parks with possibly uses within other departments. We also need to refine the boundaries possibly for some of the different parks, and so there's different considerations depending on which park it is. The next steps on each of the parks is a little bit different, so we'll probably start going through the easier ones one by one, and then move forward to the more difficult ones as over the coming months.
Because you do have some deed restricted ones in that Phase 2, but I really don't understand why McLaughlin Promenade is in Phase 2.
It's more in the definition of what the park is, as opposed to the actual park being recognized. I think everyone recognizes that it was to be used. I mean, it was deeded to the city to be used for the citizens of Oregon City, to be used as open space or citizens' purposes. I forget how it was listed, if it was for green space or
it was the same
public
thing as the
plaza
public
kind of,
squares.
yeah.
I can't figure out why, when they did the charter amendment, they left it out, because it was the exact same thing as the 4 public squares. And I don't understand what else. I mean, the boundaries, we know what the boundaries are. We know it was dedicated as a park, but designated as a park by McLaughlin. Why isn't that an easy adoption?
I think it's more in the boundaries. We don't have a
Survey?
Thank you.
Yeah.
We don't have a survey completed for that property.
Those apartments and some other buildings are actually built onto what we have designated that park to be.
Yeah,
So,
it's a little complicated. It does go down further over near the Singer Hill a little bit, and there's some adjoining properties on, so it's going to be a little bit of a process.
Okay, and what about Old Kanema? What's the issue with that?
There's a park that bleeds over into on the other side of the right-of-way. So I believe it's 5th that runs down off of South End Road. We actually have park that's over on across the street, a little blip of a piece of property that's not really usable for recreational purposes, but need to kind of figure out what the best step forward, what that would look like.
Okay, so what is going to happen? Are these going to come back before us as plans are made?
Exactly, yeah.
And then the other one, oh, and Stafford is probably the strongest deed restriction we have. Is there?
Actually, I do remember what the reason was. The language, it was a proportionality of a larger plot previous, and so there's a percentage of the larger property that needs to be, and so it was finding that actual boundary and making sure that it was true and accurate.
Did we give the house too much property, or does the park have too much?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
I think there was also that private purchase, the owners purchased that barn from the city in Stafford Park, if I'm not mistaken. And so that, I don't know if that's part of the issue,
Yeah,
why.
the house and the barn ended up getting excluded from the
Correct.
That
park.
could be why
so-
the percentage didn't quite add up when we were looking at it.
Okay.
It didn't
So-
meet the sniff test for the easy properties to move forward.
Okay, so basically, we're just taking the cream off the top, but we'll
We'll
be
come
discussing the
forward
rest
in the coming
later.
months for the other ones as we have parks that are easy to move forward, as we determine what the best process to move forward is.
So do you take any, Straight Cemetery is one, I don't know how many people even know where that's at. A few of us might. But does Parks actually do some
maintain streets.
They do maintenance over there? Vandalism, or is it more of just weed eating and,
Weed eating and not a lot of vandalism, luckily.
good,
It doesn't-
you know?
There is some.
So there's boundary issues there too? Is that another reason why it's for more discussion?
Yeah,
Seems
it's,
like
boundary issues primarily. It's actually the GIS overlay versus the map overlay. It's such a small piece, and it actually doesn't quite match.
Right up.
And so we just want to make sure that we have the appropriate boundaries.
So I guess that does leave me needing to ask what's with Mountain View Cemetery? GIS has beautiful boundaries.
Yeah, so there's some
lots of
adjoining
canyon.
properties that are owned by the city that are currently not recognized as part of the park or part of the cemetery. And so further discussion needs to occur to figure out next steps. Actually, I think it's part of the property that Metro is planning for part of the trail to run through to connect through to the neighborhood back behind the cemetery.
You have fun with that one, because I think I'm up to 18 deeds I've pulled on that property.
Yeah,
So it seems like the commission is fairly motivated to get this done.
Yeah.
What's their vision for getting this on the ballot or for the vote of the people to make this happen?
So the next steps, so I'll go through this really. So the future steps, so any new properties intended to be a park will be adopted through ordinance by the commission as a park. So as we acquire additional properties, one of the steps that we'll go through on our checkbox is to move it forward to be recognized as a park by ordinance, hopefully with a naming process at that same time. And then if the commission requests, we can update the charter by vote of the people to incorporate the parks designated by commission through ordinance. Parks adopted by ordinance would have then the same protections. Parks adopted by ordinance do have the same protections as parks listed in the charter. So regardless of whether or not they're actually physically in the charter or if they are recognized through ordinance as being a park by the city commission, they have the same level of protection.
Under Chapter 10.
Correct. So I don't, it is my understanding from the work session that there was no request for us to move forward to actually update the charter to incorporate the parks that are listed by ordinance. So in theory, the charter would still list the 11 parks and not all of our parks as being charter protected, but they would have the same protections as the parks listed in the charter.
Okay, I'm going to pose a question to you. What if you have a future commission that decides to put out an ordinance to actually remove a park from the listed in the ordinance? The charter would protect it.
Right?
But if the governing body has the capability of coming back with an ordinance to remove a park,
It'd still
I
require a
think
vote of the
it's,
people.
yeah, I
Right.
think it's the city attorney's position that it would still need to go to the vote of the people.
okay.
Yeah, now, the charter covered everything that was purchased or donated from that point on as a park.
Well, they listed
So
them.
that, no,
Yeah,
they
and
listed the
that's-
parks that were in
Yep.
existence at the time, but they added the language that all future acquisitions were protected by the charter.
Okay.
So,
So the language, so additional parks may be created, let's see. Last bullet point, whenever any real property is designated as a park, so as soon as the commission designates it as a park by ordinance, it'd be subject to all the provisions of this chapter.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it would have the same protections. They couldn't change it at that point. It would have to go to a vote of the people.
and basically, I don't see any need to go spend money on a vote, on an election to do what this already says you can do.
And that seemed to be the general consensus of the
I agree.
commission when I brought this forward. Yeah.
Makes sense.
So if we do have, I believe, a motion and a second, unless there's further discussion, I can take roll.
So the motion is to move forward with the exception of the previous motion we made on DeMet Park, right?
Correct. So the motion would be to move forward with adoption, recommendation to City Commission to adopt by ordinance Chapin, Filbert Run, Glen Oak, Harkey, Hazelwood, Hillendale, Park Place, Richard Bloom Top Park, Shenandoah, and Wesley Lynn Park. Okay, I will take roll. Daniels?
Aye.
Ballinger?
Aye.
Mitchell?
Aye.
Cook?
Aye.
Neely?
Aye.
Maury?
I,
Fowler Tice?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes.
I do that often.
Great.
And there we are with the non-charter park.
Right.
yeah, really.
Right,
That's where you're standing, right? Where are you when you took the picture?
I never have understood why they left that out.
Well, there are issues of private property.
No, but I mean, originally in the charter.
Next on the agenda is the practical goals update. We had talked about revising or updating the current goals we have. I had that as an action item, and I have to apologize to the committee. I have not had time to do that. I've been fully consumed at work, so I apologize. Buena Vista House?
So not a major update. We did give an update at the last meeting. We have had recently a couple of construction firms come through and give estimates on the amount of work that it would be required to bring it up to open the house as a public meeting space. The stakeholder group did put together a scope of work design that they would like to move forward with getting estimates. We're working internally with the building official to refine that scope of work and make sure that it meets all applicable codes, and then to have a revised version to move forward. So we're in that process currently. Once we have all of that information, we would then come back to PRAC with a presentation to move forward a recommendation to the City Commission.
Okay. What level of protection does this house have? It's not on the local inventory, or is it?
It's not on local inventory. It is, we did work with SHPO, and they did recognize that it is eligible for cultural significance and not architectural significance. So I forget the criteria. There's criteria A and B. I forget which one, but for the cultural impact that it had. The physical structure is not the story. The people who used the structure.
Well, if Karen can do it in less than 2 minutes, could you tell us what the cultural significance is? Or do you know?
The home of the first neighborhood association with real power in this city. How's that? I mean, it was the first truly unified neighborhood in Buena Vista that moved, got things done, came to the city, got streets, got sidewalks, and that was their meeting place, and donated to them as a meeting place, and then donated to the city when the club ceased to exist.
Congratulations, in less than 2 minutes.
And
I didn't
Karen,
need a little red button.
where was the original location?
Out here in the parking lot.
Oh,
Here?
Yeah,
oh, okay.
Oh,
the house was out kind of where
Okay.
the staff parking lot.
But it was built in Oregon City then?
It was built in Oregon
Okay.
City in the early 1900s, and it was a house and apparently at a joint, it's two structures, but there's some question as to what the second structure is. Because the club history only shows that it was the one house that was, there was a 2-lot deep drugstore on the corner here, and the house was in the lot behind. So roughly out here in the employee parking lot.
Yeah,
And when did it move?
1930 or so.
Or so.
$100, 2 men and a horse.
Nice. They were into moving houses with horses in those days.
And what surprised me is they were still using the horse.
Not the same horse, I hope.
I think they retired the McLaughlin House horse. Probably soon after that move.
All right. Willamette Falls Legacy Project update.
So I did send out an email to the group with a little bit of an update. So the property owner did end up coming current on both utilities and taxes. So those have been paid. Easement payments have, to my knowledge, not been paid yet. But the partners group did decide to move forward with the joint permit application to the Army Corps and Department of State Land. So expecting that process to move forward. In the meantime, staff are working behind the scenes on some environmental studies as well as the design criteria for the amenities at the park. So what the look and feel of the park will be as we move forward to construction documents.
Good news.
And if anyone is not signed up, they did open up the site tours in early June, and I hear they filled up pretty quickly. But if you are still interested, or if anyone in the public is interested in going out and getting a tour of the site, there's some information on the Oregon City website as well as Discover the Falls website.
Ermitinger House.
So a couple of things for the Ermitinger House. Look at my notes.
Oh, can we, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention, of course, you had a summer work session, a pre-work session, commission work session where the Buena Vista House, people could visit it.
Oh, yes, yeah.
And you mentioned two different, I think, quotes in terms of how much it would cost. They're informal, I know, but you might want to go back and mention it. One seems like it's problematic. The other one is, I was amazed at how low it was.
So the estimates from the construction companies that we have received thus far, one was over $1 million. So $1,065,000 was their estimate for the work to be done. The other construction firm that came in was, I believe, roughly $130,000 to get done.
That's what we thought.
One of the stakeholder group members is an architect by trade and is assuming it'll be closer to $130,000. So we are going through the process of trying to get his refined scope of work so that we can have construction firms come out and give us estimates on what that cost would be so that we can have educated conversation around what those improvements would cost.
There may also be some possibility of some donated work too, for some of the subcontracting.
Yeah.
I'd just like to comment because that's where Atkinson Park? Yeah, Atkinson Park. And I just kind of walked around it when we were there. And of course, there's invasives in various areas, but there are other areas around there that are almost all native species. So it's got recreational equipment, but part of it really functions as a natural area.
Yeah, it's a great space.
Wildlife up there.
Yeah. So the Ermitinger House, we did hire a lead docent, Lisa Damaris. She began work on May 15th. So she's a week and a half or so into her new role. Rochelle is working with her and getting things prepped for our Oregon City Heritage Days event coming up on June 22nd and 23rd, Friday and Saturday. And additionally, we're getting ready for the grand opening celebration, which is scheduled for July 7th from noon until 4 p.m.
That's a Saturday, right?
Saturday.
That's a Rose Festival parade, right?
No, it's in July 7th.
Oh,
Rose Festival
Saturday
parade is
after the
on
4th.
June 9th.
oh, okay.
Yeah. So we invite everyone, obviously the members of PrAC, but also the members of the community to come out on July 7th and enjoy the Ermatinger House. Ribbon cutting, displays, all kinds of fun things. So,
And what time again?
noon to 4.
ODOT, I-205.
Yes, so I have a visual on this, so we're gonna do a very quick PowerPoint.
Cited and cringe all I just say.
Ooh, so much for down the storm.
So we have, as most of you are aware, ODOT is in the process of a widening project for I-205. They've been in conversations with city officials as well as staff to kind of talk about next steps and how to move forward with conducting the widening of the Abernathy Bridge, as well as kind of some additional work in leading up to the bridge. The main focus of the work is to, I'll use the pointer here, is to widen the span. And so they have some new columns that will need to go in place along the bridge work on both sides of the bridge. The right-of-way for ODOT kind of comes through this general area. So you'll notice one of the main things that you'll notice is there's a little bit of overhang here in John Storm Park and a little bit of overhang here into Sportscraft. Knowing the charter piece that we just went through, and talking about building things within parks that are not for park purposes, this would trigger that and require a vote of the people. So ODOT representatives will be moving forward with a formal request to City Commission to go onto the ballot and request of the voters to allow ODOT to build out a small portion of the ODOT bridge within the properties of the parks. Now, this will be basically airspace, not actually building on the physical property, but the property above, 60 feet above where you would actually be recreating down within the park. So in all reality, wouldn't have a huge impact on the everyday use of those facilities, but it is included in the property, as it were, of each of those parks, and so we need to have a vote of the people.
Where does property end vertically?
That's a good question. Probably not at 60 feet. Yeah, somewhere higher than 60 feet, I guess. I'm not sure, honestly, but yeah, in discussions with our legal counsel, it was determined that this would require a vote of the people in order to move forward.
Weird.
Yeah.
When ODOT did the Arch Bridge, Main Street, we got a lot of money from ODOT to do the Main Street work. You think we can shake money out of ODOT here to use for other purposes, since they're going to impact Oregon City quite a bit?
Yeah, so that is part of the discussion we've had. There will be impacts, and so a couple of things we're going to talk about briefly. There is, as you noticed, some what they're calling right-of-way. So these yellow sections are currently noted as being essential pieces for the construction. What they're planning on doing is using the current bridge platforms that are the north and south running lanes, and actually separating them and sliding them out onto the new columns and support structures, and then building out the lanes in the middle. When they do that, though, they're going to need access to the right-of-way in order to get all their equipment up and to be able to make that all the necessary build-out of the bridge. with that, they're requesting to use John Storm Park. As you know, in this area, there's not a lot of usable space. They're going to need a lot of heavy equipment and a lot of supplies and things that'll need to go back and forth onto the bridge and into the areas that they'll be touching. So they're requesting the John Storm Park as a staging area and construction access. Additionally, they're requesting to have some right-of-way here where they would actually build an access bridge across and up in order to build out the columns over here on the side. With the impact of the construction process, it's going to be a little bit of a lengthy process, so it'll probably be a 2 to 3 year build out of the bridge and of the widening project. So there will be an impact. There's a process, a 6F and 4F processes that we'll need to move through, which is a little technical, but because it is impacted by the work, there is some need to proportionately make improvements in properties for the park purposes. So we're planning on moving forward. ODOT is scheduled to give a commission presentation on June 20th, where they'll just touch on this briefly, and then they're planning on in July coming back to the commission and giving a formal presentation to request to go to a vote of the public. Additionally, in July, they'll be coming to the PRAC meeting to give a presentation to talk both about the requirement to go to a vote of the people, as well as what these impacts mean and what any improvements might look like as well for us moving forward under the 4F process.
What is their anticipated start date?
I don't think it's anticipated until 2020.
So that gives us enough time to ask them to build us another boat launch?
There's always time for that.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it looks like it's going to interfere with the Sportcraft one.
Yeah, so they did, you know, we've had conversations and let them know that, you know, especially around the fishing season, that it's very important that the impacts be minimized as much as possible. They're aware of that. Their intent is to not impact the fishing season, to allow, even with the bridge going across, it'll allow access underneath the bridge. They've done hydrology studies to determine the height and the appropriate spacing between the bridge and the access for the boat ramp. So there's anticipating not a major impact, although there, I'm sure from time to time will be impacts that will require the shutdown of that area.
Question that's not really relevant to this conversation, but just more curiosity on my part is, as part of this build out, is that to bring it up? Will they also bring it up to current seismic standards? I mean,
Yes.
that does impact the city. So
Yeah, so that is, I believe, the main purpose of the project is to do the seismic improvements.
not to widen it.
Yeah. So they are widening it, but the major piece is to do the seismic improvements, and they're going to beef up the support columns quite a bit. And they're
Great.
I think, going to be something like 16 feet wide columns that'll be constructed, going fairly
Thank
deep
you.
into the river.
I had a question regarding Clackamat Park and master planning.
Yes.
And we know that that's been a standing agenda item, and we are slowly working our way towards that. Is it something that we're putting off until after ODOT's finished with what they're doing, or we want that in place before they start construction? I'm in places like the lot next to McDonald's, which is basically for sale. Are they using some of that? It is not? Okay, well, anyway, it's available for perhaps for some of the staging that they might need. So I don't know how we're going to try to incorporate what their a 3-year projects into what our master planning is for that park, including a boat ramp if we're even going to look at doing that?
Yeah, I would envision, so we're going to start that process this year. And so the master planning process would be complete before any of the construction would start on the ODOT project here. We have had conversations around they'll need, parking for all of the construction folks and, additional staging areas. At one point, they did ask about the overflow parking adjacent to Clackamas Park, but I believe, and I don't want to speak for ODOT, but they have additionally had conversations around using this grass area, which is actually owned by ODOT, as parking and additional staging for this project. So at this point, it's not my understanding that they're requesting or will need the overflow parking near the Clackamas Park.
I was not being facetious when I said we got a grant from ODOT when they did the Arch Bridge and it was, I want to say 1.5 or 2.5 million to do the Main Street improvements. And I don't see why we shouldn't be negotiating with ODOT to assist us on the moving forward on our actual implementation of the master plan.
Especially if we had one in place.
Especially if we had one in place, yes.
Well, and as much yellow as in there, that's going to be a lot of damage to the park. I assume they'll restore the park.
Yes.
I would kind of suggest a little negotiation that, lease the gravel lot from Urban Renewal and
The gravel lot
minimize the
is,
impact.
City.
It belongs to the Urban Renewal Commission.
City-owned property.
Since when?
City-owned property.
No,
Which,
it's Urban Renewal owns it still.
The lot across from Clackamas.
The lot behind McDonald's belongs to
no, those two lots on both
City.
sides of McLaughlin are city-owned property. They're not Urban Renewal.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, it used to be the sewer treatment plant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But nice little lease for unrestricted access to that and a little less impact on the park might be a nice negotiation.
Yeah. So I believe there's intent to, start those conversations and figure out what are the needs of the community, what would be the biggest, the most appropriate impact on the positive side for the park system, given the negative impacts of the construction process. So we'll have those continuing conversations with them as we move forward.
So is that something that we can look at as a future agenda item?
Yeah, so they're positioned to come and give a presentation to PRAC on July 26th. Additionally, they will be, again, giving commission presentations and during the month of July to the City Commission to talk about the need to go to a vote of the people to use a portion of the park for non-parks use. And then they're anticipating to hopefully have a resolution adopted by the commission during the August 1st commission meeting to go on the November ballot. Great.
Okay. Other general business?
I have a couple of items under other general business. So the first one that I have is the PRAC tour scheduled for next month. I'm going to hand out a suggested itinerary for the group. This is at the previous meeting, PRAC requested that we visit all of the parks within our system. So we are planned to attend during our June meeting all of the parks. Some of them are noted as drive-by only. Some of them are noted as walk and talk or stop and talk locations. And so this would be, again, your opportunity to, if you have changes that you'd like to see that you really want to stop and have a further conversation about, or sites that you think that we currently have as walk and talk sites that you think we could do as drive-by, definitely let me know. We will hopefully be finalizing this in the next week or so that I can work with the driver to make sure we have the route all worked out and have all the details in place by the time we take our tour.
So is this during our regularly scheduled meeting, correct?
Correct.
On the 28th?
So as we discussed, as we've been discussing that, it most likely will be an earlier start. So we'll probably do like a 5:30 start on that evening, which is with the
28th.
So 5:30 start, we'll have box lunches for the group, so you don't need to worry about dinner. You're heading straight from work to join us. And we'll hit hopefully all the parks, if not as many as we possibly can. We have roughly scheduled from around a 5:30 to 8:30 time period.
But at that time, it's going to be late,
Yeah, it'll
a
still
lot
be
later, so
Yeah.
we got more time.
Yep,
actually.
9:30,
Yeah.
10 o'clock.
Yeah.
Great. So if you have concerns or suggested changes, please email me within the next week or so, and we'll finalize this.
How big is the bus will be taking?
It's a 15 passenger.
We have some people here that attend our meetings and so forth. I was just wondering if there's space to invite a few people that almost always come to our meetings.
In other words, can we fit an O'Brien?
If we were able to fit another couple of folks, I don't see that.
Okay? Yeah,
If there is
great
interest.
idea.
Great. So the other general business item that I have is earlier this evening, we had a Ladderette Park open house and talked about the next phases of that park development. One of the things that they are moving forward with is a grant with Nike to develop the court surfacing for the basketball court, and they requested that there would be a opportunity for the PrAC chair to write a letter of support for that grant. It does have a deadline of June 1st, so I can work with Chris in getting a letter drafted and signed off if it's the wish of this group to have that done. So I just ask for maybe a motion to support that.
I would move to write a letter of support for the Nike grant for the Ladderette Park improvement.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? None?
Great. Thank you so much.
I'm going to make a request, if I may. We're coming back to the PrAC goals update. I think would be, I think we perhaps ought to have a dedicated meeting to the PrAC goals.
Okay.
If that's,
It's like a work session.
a work session type of meeting.
Have a special one.
So my intent or my vision was to go ahead and draft some updates to that, send it out to the group, and then we could discuss, if we want to meet as, like a special session or something like that ahead of the regular meeting.
Yeah,
So,
okay.
do you want to move that?
Yeah, no, I don't have to move it, or if we have that special work session to talk about them, but, give a decent chunk of time to it.
Okay.
Those are the only general businesses that I have, unless there's others from the group.
Okay, member reports. Start with Bill.
I have none.
None.
Nothing from me?
None for me.
None for me at this point?
Monday, 10 a.m., Memorial Day ceremonies at Mountain
that's
View
right.
Cemetery. And I spent the day tying bows for our flowers.
And what time is it?
10 a.m.
Okay. And I don't know if there are any people here that haven't visited the Parents of Murdered Children Memorial that's there. If you go to the memorial service, be sure to go over and see that memorial. It's a great memorial, and I personally find it very, very moving. Go on the back. There's some things written on the back that I think are somewhat inspirational.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Bill, or Doug, where is that?
That's at the cemetery.
Okay.
Yeah, right next to the Veterans Memorial.
Okay.
Pioneer Center updates. The Seed to Supper class is now in progress and is full. We continue to deal with the homeless issues, cleaning up garbage and I'm going to say droppings, rather than the other word. We want to say thank you to the park staff for continuing to work hard, keeping the park grounds looking great. The senior day trips are continuing to be well attended. Jamie Davey, Client Service Director, has taken an additional class through Ride Connection and is now approved as a person who can conduct our driver orientations. Carl will be retiring in July, so we'll be having bus driver interviews in the near future. Oregon City Parks Foundation updates. The foundation, in partnership with Oregon City Parks, has been interviewing invasive plant spray contractors for the Ivy in Waterboro Park. The winning bidder was or is Rosario Franco Restoration, who comes highly recommended by the Portland Parks Department. Rosario recommended recommended the 9 acres be sprayed 3 times. John Waverly has written the contract, and as soon as we hear back from Rosario, the first spray will be scheduled with follow-up sprays this coming fall and again in fall of 2019. Because of this, we sent in a request for an extension to our 2017 Community Enhancement Grant to cover the length of time it will take to have the repeat ivy sprays in the 9 acres of the park. Promenade Park Xeriscape planning, we've added another 35 plants and are searching the nurseries for the remaining plants. We are watering weekly till the plants become established and will weed on a regular basis. We also have a small planting at the Pioneer Center front entrance and expect to schedule that in the next couple of weeks. The VFW has kindly given us permission to use their outdoor faucet during our watering visits. That's all I have.
Could I ask a question? We've got a path that goes up to the overlook at Waterboard Park that starts on John Adams. Is that all? I assume that's all under city easement. Is that the case?
The waterboard overlook is right of way, and it's all city.
So that pathway that goes all the way down to John Adams Street is also part of
the pathway that goes all the way down is parks. So that's vacated. It used to be right of way. It was vacated. It is owned and operated by parks.
Yeah, I'm not talking about the road. I'm talking about a pedestrian park.
Yeah, there's another one.
It goes from John Adams Street up, and then it hits the upper Fourth. And
It's called the Doug Neely Trail.
Doug Neely Trail, yeah. That is unimproved right of way.
Okay,
It goes through that section.
all right.
Yeah,
So that's ours too, or just the cities?
that's the cities.
It's
Okay.
a street.
Yeah, so we Parks maintains it partially. Mostly the homeowners. A lot of them help to maintain it as well.
We got a lot of good native species on that pathway.
Yeah.
Okay. Staff reports.
So the recreation report was sent out to the group by Denise earlier this week. Parking enforcement, just wanted to update the group. We've received several complaints in regards to the parking at Park Place Park, and primarily we believe due to the Charter Academy across the street. We've had interactions with the principal of the Charter Academy, who is very gracious and actually went over and started placing an A-frame sign in front of the park, which asked the Charter Academy not to park in the park, and it has seemed to work. Their school year actually ends today. So we envision we won't have any more issues for the next couple of months, but we are looking at long-term solutions to make sure it's not an ongoing problem in the future.
I've been driving by there the last couple of weeks, and there hasn't been anybody in there except for people using the park.
Okay, perfect. And then park deferred maintenance and funding. So this is a topic that will be coming forward very shortly. I'm working with the city manager on the best approach as to working with PRAC and the city commission, either through a joint work session or some process of utilizing this group and moving forward to commission. So in the next probably month or so, probably determining what that best approach will look like. And we'll have additional information to follow.
Okay, future agenda items, any?
I have one, and it doesn't have to be in the near future, but I noticed Portland is doing these walks, park walks that go from one park to another. If we could identify, and they'd probably be mostly neighborhood streets in order to do it, but safe walking paths for our parks, and actually try to establish something in the next couple of years that enable us to go out with citizens and point out our parks and so forth, particularly after we get all these things officially on the charter and so forth. So give people more opportunity to know what we do have in the city.
So Sunday parkways, kind of temporary closure of streets.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
And party at the end.
And a party at the end, exactly.
No other items? Okay, next scheduled meeting is June 28th, and we're talking about taking a tour out in the field at that time to begin about 5:30. But
5:30.
You'll let us know more detail on that.
Yeah,
as we
we'll
get
get
closer.
additional details to you. More than likely, we'll be starting out at the cemetery.
Where will be getting the lunches at, or the dinner, shall we call it?
I'll be sending out information on that, so we'll be ordering out probably box lunch stuff.
At the cemetery, will you eat at the cemetery or on the tour?
I hear that on previous tours we've eaten on the bus as we've gone around, but we can. This is your party, however you guys want to approach it. I'd be
Dinner
open
tour.
to-
If there's a desired park, that would be nice, but we
Yeah.
don't want to stay there very long. We want to
Exactly,
make sure to
yeah.
go by all the parks.
It's a very tight timeline, so
Yeah.
depending
So-
on how you want to approach that.
Is the bus going to pick us up here or at the cemetery?
Probably meeting at the cemetery.
Okay.
That's a pain.
Okay, if there's nothing else, we'll adjourn for the evening. Thank you.
Thank you.